Раді вітати вас на лабораторії створення документальних VR-фільмів, яка народилась у Харкові, як і фестиваль Docudays. Мене звати Оксана Сигарева, я кураторка лабораторії. Поруч зі мною Марія Степанюк, яка є координаторкою.
Ми дуже раді, що саме Docudays доєднався до її реалізації як місце сили документалістів країни. Саме для них ми створили цю лабораторію, але насправді вона буде доречна спеціалістам з різних сфер.
Лабораторія пропонує 6 кроків зі створення VR-фільмів, від розробки історії до промоції та дистрибуції. Для цього ми запросили 6 спеціалістів прочитати лекції на прикладах з їх практики. Головна задача лабораторії – розширити інструментарій документального кіно через залучення можливостей віртуальної реальності.
Ми сподіваємось, що прослухавши всі лекції, вам буде легше йти на територію VR. І після лабораторії з'явиться більше історій мовою віртуальної реальності.
Сьогодні ви почуєте неймовірну Зіллу Watson з лекцією «Завоювання аудиторії VR». Зілла прийшла у VR з журналістики на BBC, де була редакторкою з питань віртуальної реальності. Тепер вона продюсерка VR-досвідів, має численні нагороди, премії та номінацію на Еммі.
Через дослідження Зілли для Оксфордського університету 2017 року ми зануримось в досвід Великобританії. Які теми найбільше цікавлять спільноту, якими способами про них говорити та як отримувати фідбек?
Протягом лекції ви можете ставити питання в чатах. У нас буде час розібрати їх в кінці лекції, а ті, хто присутні в Zoom, матимуть можливість задати питання наживо. Вітаємо Зіллу!
Hello everyone. Welcome to the talk today on virtual reality. I'm speaking to you from my home in London, and today what I'm going to do is share some of the things that I've been working on over the last 5 or 6 years ago in virtual reality, and hopefully give you a really good grounding some of the things we found that have worked, both in terms of stories and the sort of stories that would really delight audiences in virtual reality. So I've been working in virtual reality since early 2015, and I got started to some extent by chance. I was working for the BBC, and we had a joint lab with University College London, UCL's computer science team. And I saw people with these big black boxes stuck to their faces and thought, that sounds interesting. I must find out what they're doing. And at the same time, I went to a talk by somebody called Noni de la Peña, who is seen as the godmother of virtual reality storytelling and virtual reality news. And she talked about the way in which virtual reality could be used to put people in a place so they could see and feel what was going on themselves, just as how in the past, foreign correspondents for newspapers wrote words to help people understand what was going on in other countries that most of us could not visit. And I got excited and intrigued, and I became compelled to understand how we could start to tell stories with virtual reality. Virtual reality wasn't new. It had been experimented with in computer science labs in universities since the 1960s, and many experiments showed how virtual reality could be used to help change how people thought. And it could be used, for example, to increase empathy and for people to understand what it was like to be somebody else. But what was new was headsets became available to consumers. Headsets like these, this is the Oculus Quest headset, which is now available. It has controllers like this, and it's incredibly powerful. This obviously wasn't available 5 years ago when I started my work, but it opens up a whole new world of storytelling to filmmakers. And today I'm going to show some examples which will both be using 360 filming and CGI to help you understand some of the possibilities of this new medium. But I'll relate it as closely to film as I can. And indeed, film history provides a lot of secrets that we mustn't forget while we try and understand how we can embrace what virtual reality offers. So if you go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Great. Next one. Today, very briefly, I'm going to talk about a lot about storytelling and some examples of some of the content we created at the BBC. I'm not going to limit this just to documentary. I'm going to include a drama one too. And the reason why I'm doing that is we need to take our influences and understanding at the moment from all genres. Otherwise, we will limit ourselves too much as to what we can do in terms of telling compelling stories. But I'm going to really root this in audience research because that is what's needed at this stage to really understand how to make this work. So if you go on to the next slide, please. Back in 2017, I was appointed as the head of the BBC's new virtual reality story lab to really work on what sort of content the BBC might use to carry out its mission to inform, educate, and entertain audiences. And because the BBC was founded in the 1920s, it has always had that mission. It started with radio and then television. And we were trying to see how virtual reality might also take that forward. And we began with a piece of research in people's homes. And we had 16 households involved, and they were all given a virtual reality headset. And over 3 months, we studied how they used it, what worked, what didn't work. And that helped us inform what sort of things we needed then to do with the content. And what happened was when people got the headset, they were incredibly excited. They tried roller coaster rides. They wanted to show all their friends. This was before COVID, so they could have their friends round to their houses, which we can't at the moment in London. But they got very, very excited by it. But after a week or 2 weeks, they started to find some of the things about the headsets annoying. The batteries ran out. They found women didn't like putting them on their faces if they were wearing makeup. And they actually found it quite hard to find the sort of content they wanted to watch. So it kind of revealed that there were some real problems around virtual reality, that it was very early days and these would be solved. So if you go to the next slide, please. We mapped out a number of friction points, and on first glance, it does look like a problem. People didn't know physical space. They didn't know where to go in their home to use the virtual reality. Our homes have been designed around having a sofa with a television in the living room and that's become part of the furniture. But the thing about virtual reality is you're better off sitting on a chair that will move around so that you can see all around you. They were embarrassed if they put the headset on in front of other people. They kept having to clean it when they used it. They didn't know what to watch. It was difficult for them to find things. Some virtual reality made them feel sick because it was badly made. You can make virtual reality that won't make most people sick, but early virtual reality especially was very poor. Their Wi-Fi speed wasn't sufficient to be able to drive the experience. They didn't know how to use and interact with it, and that made them feel silly. And so all in all, there were lots of problems. And then if they watched a piece of content that wasn't good, they might not pick up the headset again for another week. So the pattern was people would get the headset, get excited, and then it would sit on the shelf for 2 weeks. Now, we knew we needed the headsets to get better, and that's part of this. Just like in the early days of television, the pictures weren't good. We needed the headsets to be easier, more comfortable, and things like that. But that is very much up to the manufacturers to do, and they know that is essential for this to become a wider medium. But the one thing that content makers and documentary and filmmakers can do is make great content, because ultimately a lot of people will go through some of those friction points if what they watch at the end of it is absolutely outstanding and gives them an amazing experience. So if you go to the next slide. So what we focused on was making great content. And I'm going to just show you a trailer of some of the things we did over the sort of 2-year period we ran this lab at the BBC. And hopefully it will just give you a glimpse of the variety of genres we attempted to cover with virtual reality. So if you could move to the next slide and play the video, that would be great.
To see them this close up is a true privilege.
We're taking you on a great adventure up this magnificent river.
We have to hold on to the trolley very tight to make sure we don't fall.
Afghans attack around you, bursting in vivid passion.
Volatile life force has been detected on board this ship.
Are you ready to join the lockdown plan?
What are you doing? We've got to put the music on.
Oh, music first, yeah. Okay, Diki, press play.
So I hope you can see from that we covered all genres, a lot of focus on journalism and documentary because that's so important to the BBC. But what those stories have in common, what VR is giving you is when you put the headset on, you step inside that story. You are there in that space, exploring it with your eyes, looking around, understanding it, and you're seeing those people. And when they look you in the eye, you feel an intense response as though you are looking to people. And in many, you're also interacting, although our mission was to keep that very simple so that people of all ages would be able to understand it and enjoy the story. So what they have in common is you, as the viewer, become much more part of this story. You are immersed inside the story. And the stories that work well for VR are stories that you want to be immersed in. So what I'm going to talk through now is some of the examples we did with BBC News, which are journalistic documentaries, but they helped us to understand so much about which stories worked best for virtual reality. And the first news series we did was a series about a huge dam that was being built in Ethiopia on the River Nile. And it's about the dam being built and the geopolitical ramifications along the River Nile and the impact on Sudan and Egypt. And what was great about this was we worked with a BBC News correspondent and we had all the resources of BBC News. We also had a great story where the River Nile itself provided a narrative ribbon that led you through from Ethiopia as we traced the Nile right through Sudan and then to the Nile Delta in Egypt. And along the way, we did interviews and news interviews, which perhaps you wouldn't do in a documentary, but we also were able to take people to explore some of the beautiful sites along the River Nile, such as the Sudanese pyramids and the Valley of the Kings. So I'm going to play you, this was using 360 video. We used a camera called the Insta Pro 360, which was a good quality camera, but suitable for the sort of speed with which we had to film this piece. We were also, alongside creating the 360 films, creating a number of films for BBC News for television. So that's how a project like this became affordable. So what I'd like to do is play you a making of for this film, because I think it gives you such a great sense of the sort of scenes that work well with a 360 camera, but also a little bit of the flavour of what goes on in a 360 filming epic project like this. So if you could play the next slide and the video, please.
You're joining us for a unique journey down the Nile, and we'll show you how a huge dam Ethiopia's building is causing big trouble downstream.
So in a moment, I'm going to show you the making of film. But before we do, let's just, I'm just going to focus on what we really learned from this, because I think, again, in terms of principles for virtual reality storytelling, there's a lot here that can inform other things. The key things were how to immerse the viewer. We found, and you can only discover this through watching lots of VR content and also through filming lots of VR content yourself, that where we put the camera had a huge impact on how you make the viewer with their headset on feel part of that story. So some scenes were difficult to achieve that. There was one scene in Damming the Nile where they were in a cafe in Sudan, and they put the camera on a seat along with the journalist and the people that they were interviewing. And you feel very much part of that conversation for the few moments you're there. And rather jokingly, the journalist said, "Do you want some water?" And it is a joke, but most people laugh when they see it. And it kind of, again, played to the fact that the viewer feels more part of it. Now, when it comes to television news, reporters tend to talk a lot and they want to explain everything. And one of the big challenges we had with the Damming the Nile project was working out that because in a VR documentary, the viewer needs to have time to look around and explore the space themselves, we had to stop our tendency to want to direct people to what they should be watching and what they should be looking at. And we had to massively reduce the number of words that we used in commentary for this. And so that was a challenge in terms of changing, I suppose, traditional expectations. If you're working on a news documentary with a journalist, you needed to hand over far more control to the viewer. And that's what you also have to do as a director of a film with VR. You're not directing every shot. You're not in control of that. You have to choose beautiful shots that will let your viewer choose what they look at. I suppose the other big challenge was doing interviews with no cutaways. That became a big challenge in terms of more traditional filmmaking techniques. That presented a bigger challenge and required greater thinking beforehand about what we wanted people to use. We also started to explore in a much more profound way recording spatial audio with this story, which is a standard thing for all virtual reality things, because as your head moves around, the sound can change with that. But again, what we found was to really get the most of spatial audio, the story has to need it. So situations where you do have sounds coming from a wonderful soundscape to listen to will always lend themselves better to spatial audio. You can sort of think in sound as well as think in pictures for VR to make it work as a story. And not only do you, so this is why I've said think in pictures and sensory thinking. Sensory thinking is about sound, but about what it will feel like to be in that place. So let's play the next video, which is our making of Damming the Nile, and hopefully that will give you a little bit more of a sense of what I'm talking through here.
From Lake Tana, the Blue Nile begins its long journey to the Mediterranean Sea. And it gets off to quite a start, plunging down this dramatic waterfall. Virtual reality is all about experiences. If you want to immerse your viewer, you've got to treat them to an amazing journey, like flying over a waterfall, or taking a balloon ride over Egypt's Luxor Valley, and give them time to enjoy it.
We're here to try and understand why it is that Egypt is so opposed to this dam that Ethiopia is building so far upstream. More of that in a bit, but for now, enjoy the view.
Writing for immersive VR is a blend of writing for TV and for radio. There are no sequences, the shots are all 30 or 40 seconds long, and how many words you fill each one with depends on the wow factor of the experience. The thought has to relate to the pictures, but not as literally as usual.
Right, very bright sun.
We've already
got one with that. Yeah,
let's put it in the
shade. Okay. You want to start here?
Yeah.
I'm Alistair Leithhead, the BBC's Africa correspondent, and this is our first stop on what's going to be an extraordinary journey. There's no behind the camera, of course, so from time to time the crew have to become invisible. But by taking you with us on assignment, we got around that. You see the crew quite a bit throughout, and you can tell they're not used to being recorded. Where you place the camera is also really important to make people feel they're there with you. In the middle of a table or watching from afar doesn't work.
Well, you're joining us for a traditional Ethiopian meal in Addis Ababa. I know you're only virtually here. I'm going to pour you a glass of water anyway, so you can join in.
That was an off-the-cuff line, which worked, so we left it in the final cut. Looking the camera in the eye, or one of them, really helps engage the audience, as does a more relaxed style, a bit more familiar and chatty than your usual news piece. This is a one-on-one experience after all. The grammar of VR is also different. There are no cutaways, so interview edits have to be mixes. We tried to keep that to a minimum, but unless you and the interviewee nails it every time, it's the only way of making the editorial point without disturbing the experience. Varying the kind of shot is also important. We experimented with drones, but getting too close to the camera can also be a bit weird. Comfort is the key to keeping the viewer engaged, and that's why so much post-production time was spent stabilising the shots.
Yasser Al-Mamun.
He was perhaps a little close. A gimbal is best at full arm's length, but at least he was enjoying himself. We used voiceover rather than subtitles, as there's already a lot to think about in every shot. What's a camel race got to do with the story? Not much, but that's okay. It's fun and a nice break. Like any doc, you need regular peaks and surprises to keep the viewer engaged.
Look over that far corner, you can see that's the final height it's going to be.
The viewer is their own director, so they can look wherever they want. You can get them facing in roughly the right direction by telling them, "Oi, over there." The other way is to use spatial audio to pull them to the focus of the shot using sound. The chatty style and the time they need to look around means there can be longer, more ranty pieces to camera. It also adds to the "you've come with us" immersion. Obviously, planning a TV doc, you have to think about great pictures anyway, but for VR, scheduling great experiences was much more important. We gave ourselves an extra day or two a week to shoot both at once. Giving people time to look around while not losing the pace of the film is a difficult balancing act, and I also repeated myself far more than usual in the script. A lot of people aren't going to be listening to everything I'm saying, especially at a music concert in northern Sudan. That's really important in such a complex story as Damming the Nile. You have to drip feed the story, building it up over time, and not overwhelming the viewer with information. I had a checklist of points to make sure we didn't miss anything. And not every kind of story works in VR. A journey is great, providing a thread to the story, giving it an easy beginning, middle and end. You've got to think carefully about whether VR really adds to the story. If it can be done on telly, do it on telly. VR really has to add extra value to be worth the time, the effort and the money to create a beautifully polished product.
So, I hope you enjoyed that. I appreciate this is a documentary audience, and what I was showing you there probably borrows far more from news journalism than documentary. It's a hybrid of the two. But the reason why that was really interesting and important for us was that actually through the simplicity of news storytelling, you understand many of the principles. And by understanding that, you can then start to experiment far more with what stories worked. News also provided the toughest ethical framework for understanding what you could and couldn't do. So many people, when they're making virtual reality documentaries using 360 film, will take out the interviewer from the picture afterwards and composite them out. And so that you just get a sense of the interviewee talking directly to the camera. But in news, once you start removing things from pictures, anyone will start to question what is real and what is not. And so that goes straight into the sort of fake news debate. So we had to engineer the story in virtual reality so that you were traveling with the crew and you saw the behind the scenes thing, because there was no other way in which we could do that ethically within a journalism ethics framework that the BBC has. So we then went on to make a series of films about the Congo. And I'd love to show you a little bit of the flavour of this, but we're running out of time, so I'm going to have to make a decision between whether you see Doctor Who or this, but I think I'll show you, I think we will have a quick look at the behind the scenes one for this. Ava's nodding, just because again, it's interesting to see those cameras out and about. I so wish I could give you all virtual reality headsets at home to see this footage as you are there. You just have to imagine that it really does feel like you're standing in a river or standing in a dam or floating over the Valley of the Kings in Egypt in a hot air balloon. It really does feel pretty magical. And that's what we were trying to give people with all these experiences. We were designing experiences within the story that would take you there yourself so that you could appreciate being there. So the Congo was an interesting one. We really wanted to show the beauty of the country as well as the troubles it was facing. And we did, following the Nile, we went to the Congo again with Alistair Leithhead, the Africa correspondent. So let's have a look at the behind the scenes video with the filming there, because again, that gives you a good sense of what works. Can you play the next? Yeah, brilliant.
It's been a frantic race up the Congo River for the team. It took us nearly 6 weeks, and it was hard. Oh, and this is Marlowe. He came with us all the way. More about him later. It was far better being on the water than in the water. We didn't expect to end up in the river. It's certainly not the easiest place to get around. Searching for gorillas was perhaps the hardest bit. When the torrential rain started 3 hours in, we thought we'd lost most of the cameras and the cameraman. Are you living the dream, Phil?
Living the dream.
And there's more to come. In the end, it really was worth it. There's a whole TV documentary for you to check out on BBC World News and the iPlayer in the UK.
There's another one as well. That's the silverback.
We had to launch the drone by hand because we had a 360-degree camera attached underneath. It meant we could capture the beauty of the country for video, but also in virtual reality. And that's where Marlowe comes into it. The round camera with 6 lenses and cameraman Virtual Phil have created an amazing VR experience, which you can see in a headset. It'll blow you away, especially the shots with the gorillas. Check out how to watch it at bbc.com/virtual reality.
Marlowe's overheated, so Phil is taking matters into his own hands.
But new technology can be temperamental.
Trying to cool him down.
Taking to the rapids wasn't in the plan, but it's the only way to see how the Wagania fishermen work close up. Again, it's a great virtual reality experience, and it almost came at the cost of Marlowe the camera.
Can you stop it there, please? Thank you. So again, you get a sense of it really is quite similar to any other form of filmmaking. You are using much longer shots than you probably would in a different sort of film. You have to really think about whether you can get your camera in the right place to compose a beautiful shot. So there's again an element that's very close to traditional documentary filmmaking there. But I suppose the real difference comes in the way you construct stories without sequences in quite the same way as you would in a regular film, and also that you constantly have to think about the comfort of the viewer, that you're not going to make them feel sick by moving the camera too much, and that you can only judge that when you put on the headset. So often you edit 360 video on a flat screen with a opened out image, and then you put your headset on, you export it, put your headset on, and things that you thought looked great on the big screen often look terrible, and then occasionally you get shots that you thought were boring on your big edit screen, and in the headset you just think, oh my goodness, and then you want to extend that shot to enable that headset experience to work. But I think with some practice and some rethinking, and especially thinking about storytelling in as simpler way as you can, any filmmaker can fairly quickly now get their heads around virtual reality filming, especially now the cameras are so much easier to use than 5 or so years ago when we were strapping together different GoPros to create 360. So it's much easier, and there are small portable cameras too that anyone can start playing with to start to understand how to make it all work. So I'm going to focus now on using CGI for a documentary experience. We had a wonderful bit of BBC archive of a journalist in 1943 who was on a Lancaster bomber plane as it left the UK, flew over Europe to bomb Berlin. It's a very difficult piece of radio to listen to, but when we wanted to do a historical virtual reality piece, and we thought using this radio archive with virtual reality would bring a real authenticity to the piece, and so that's what we did. And so in the virtual reality, you are on the bomber as it takes off and flies over, and you're hearing the voices from the archive audio of the time. And I'm going to play you a little bit of a film to again show the audience impact of it. So there was a programme on BBC television called Back in Time for School, which showed a group of kids what school was like in Victorian days, in the 1920s. And they also did a programme on future of school and what it might look like in 20 years' time. And I'd like you to see this, because I'd like you to see the impact of this piece on the audience, because this is ultimately why this medium is so exciting for me. So if we play the next bomb, you're going to see the impact of being on that plane for these kids.
In the classrooms of the future, pupils could be fully immersed in the virtual worlds of the past.
At 8,000 feet now, oxygen's on. Hello, navigator.
This simulation uses original radio recordings taken from a real mission in 1943, making the pupils feel like first-hand witnesses to history.
That's so real.
Oh, there's a compass.
They're pumping up the flag in a steady stream.
Oh, they're having a go at us. Oh my God.
Baby, you got bombs?
Yeah, mate.
It's gotten so close to me.
Oh my God.
It's so close. Come. Stop.
Tia, That was going to make you jump. Can you hear me okay? How has it been up there in a Lancaster bomber?
It's really weird.
Yeah.
It feels like you're actually in that time period. Like, it feels like you're actually there.
It's hidden that now.
Hello, engineer. Skipper here.
I mean, they're really living it when you look round now.
I felt really scared doing it because I was hearing the bombs going off. I was looking down and seeing the towns and stuff. You don't realise like how much is actually there. Like when you read it, it's just what you know, but from that, it's like what you've almost experienced.
So there you have it. I mean, I love that video because it just sums it up. It feels like you are actually there, she says. It feels like you're going back in history. And you'll notice the CGI, it's not totally photorealistic, but the magical thing that we've learned is that once you put the headset on, as long as the scale is right, your brain adjusts to it. So it doesn't feel like even much simpler animation. It feels different once you put that headset on. And that, again, provides a wonderful toolkit for documentary makers to explore all sorts of different ways of telling stories that put people in a place. And there's a wonderful example that just featured at South by Southwest that I wanted to highlight, that a documentary filmmaker called Sam Wilson made about China, and he did it for the New Yorker magazine. And again, he's used a mixture of illustration and some 360 film, and it's very, very powerful. And I'll add at the end in notes a link to the New Yorker piece that you can see online to sort of see the technique. But it really can help, again, take you there. And feel what it's like in a very, very emotional and visceral way, in a way that that is more powerful than a film when it comes to the right story. So what I'd like to talk about now is a non-documentary example, but again, this is pushing on interactivity and CGI. So the BBC's top drama brand, Doctor Who. I hope everyone's heard of it, but anyway, the Doctor in the series that was launched 2 years ago became a woman for the first time. And we had the opportunity. Oh, I've got a question here. Shall I? Is that for now? How do you? Oh, we'll answer that one later about Dome Cinemas. But if there's anything now, do keep throwing them there. I've got the chat up now so I can see it. So if you don't understand something or want me to slow down, please do let me know. So I'm going to show you. We created a drama. And again, it was very simple. To make it work, we've kept it in one location. We've kept it inside the police box that you see there, which when you open the door of it, it actually is enormous. It's a space-time joke in Doctor Who. And so we've set it in one place to keep it simple. We wanted to explore through this how you could be part of the story, interacting. So, for example, you are asked to actually drive the TARDIS, where you've got to do some things. You've also got to help throw some magic potions at a monster that's about to explode. But with so much drama and documentary, what we found is that introducing too much interactivity often slowed down the drama. So we've had this constant challenge, which you also get in web dramas in terms of, and web documentaries with interactivity. It's this balance between, do you want to keep that pace going and control that, or do you want to allow people to interact? So the way that we did that with Doctor Who was make the interaction very meaningful. There were certain parts of the story where you became crucial to it and you were told to do something, and there was some jeopardy in that. And this technique, and I've also seen this used very successfully in a number of virtual reality documentaries. I also want to show you this video because it shows the range of film production techniques and things that, again, you might find yourself using in virtual reality, from motion capture through to the animation. So this was created by Passion Pictures for the BBC with scripts by the Doctor Who team. So let's have a look at the making of Doctor Who: The Runaway. The next slide.
I love Doctor Who's little boy, so I would just have given anything to be in the TARDIS with the Doctor, going on an adventure with her.
This is putting all our knowledge and understanding of what makes good VR together with a really brilliant team from Doctor Who and Passion to create something very special.
We wanted to combine in this project the best of animation and the best of VR.
The viewers are going to enjoy a lot to actually take a part inside this adventure together with the Doctor.
Although we knew the BBC would be bringing their own scriptwriters on this, we had to come up with the kind of concept and the theme of what that VR experience would be. We came up with, had to be set in the TARDIS. The big hook was 5 minutes with the Doctor.
So the Doctor is sheltering some kind of a very cute and deadly alien creature, and at the same time you, the viewer, you got a nasty knock on the head and you wake up in this mess. The whole film is actually a long shot and it's fully happening inside the TARDIS.
As we always do with characters, we start with drawings. Then when we are happy with a character, we put it in 3D.
Ah, excellent. You're awake.
It's been important to everyone in making it feel like it belongs in the same family of work as the show.
We actually pitched with quite a classic sort of cel-shaded anime look. I think this is the one where we got to the idea of Jodie as an animated character that felt like her.
We've witnessed when people take part in this VR adventure that as soon as they put the headsets on, they step into the Doctor Who world.
Spuds! They hunt down and destroy anyone or anything that threatens the stability of the universe.
They soon forget it's animated.
This is my sonic screwdriver. Very valuable. Don't break it.
Translating should not strip away things from the show. It should bring something new.
Obviously what Passion are great at is that character animation and performance, and that's at the heart of this, and it's really what drives it.
So basically I've been Doctor Who.
Here is Volta.
Acting for VR, we have this freedom, especially for this part, it's very physical.
Not working. Okay then, I'm going old school.
So you have to be really expressive with your body.
There is this rhythm inside the show that we love to mimic, and I think is working very well in animation.
From a pacing point of view and just an animation point of view, everything happens a bit breakneck speed.
It's very funny to direct something where there's explosion every 3 minutes.
When you watch Doctor Who VR, it just feels like it works, but underneath that is a complexity. Into the mixing bowl went brilliant animation, brilliant artwork, a great script, great acting, great mocap performance, great music, great sound. And what was amazing about Passion was they had that strong aim of doing something really outstanding throughout.
Every project I do is there is, you know, there's something in it that you know is hard, but we'll make it awesome. And that's kind of why we put ourselves through this.
We're trying to achieve this feeling of presence, where the viewer is actually part of the story. I think this is going to be a very unique feeling when you see the experience in the end.
So not documentary there, but again we learned a lot from it, and I suppose the biggest difference between what you can do in VR, and this is for drama or documentary, about establishing characters is a challenge in VR, whereas in drama you can, and on television and in film you can gradually establish characters much more slowly. The VR works best if you can plunge your viewers straight in the situation and there isn't too much backstory for them to get to grips with, because it's very intense and it's very sensory. There is only so much your brain can deal with. So subtlety doesn't work. You've got to make it easy for them. And that's why I make no apologies in going back to fairly tried and tested and simple storytelling methods to get things started. Sometimes when you're dealing with new technology, going back to the old ways is the best way to start. If you start to break everything apart, including story, character and everything else, as well as using new technology, sometimes you can leave your viewers and audiences a little lost. So it's good advice for getting started, and then the next stage is to break those boundaries and discover what can take it beyond that. So let's move on to the next. Oh, this is the slide. One of the things I should mention is, because many of these pieces have been, VR pieces have been shown at festivals and on locations in museums and other things, installations have also become a wider part of that storytelling. So here was the installation at Tribeca Film Festival, where the doctor's TARDIS, the police box, was there. It needed a very simple one, but this is another way in which documentary makers can extend their story beyond just the headset. Of course, that doesn't work at home, so that's a different challenge. So if we go on to the next slide, I'm just going to summarize some really basic principles to start thinking about what makes good VR stories. And the first thing is one I talked about at the start. It's stories where being there, having a presence in that situation, is going to increase your understanding and engagement with that story. So those are going to make it, any situation that provides that is going to make it easy for you as a documentary maker. And you need to play to that sense of being there. That's your first question. Will the viewer benefit from being there? So often, you know, a story where some understanding of the space in which it takes place is going to be the first clue to that. The second thing is this can be a very emotional form of storytelling, and that seems to be what helps make it stick in people's heads. So again, play to that. It's using it to get across a lot of factual information. You might be better off not doing VR. This is about an emotional connection with a place and people rather than huge amounts of factual understanding. Television or even text is usually better if you've got lots and lots of complex factual information to convey as well. The story is spatial. I've already mentioned that in connection with the presence and immersion, but a story where you need to understand and see the space to feel connected with the story is critical. And that's, again, slightly different from where you would start with a traditional film. The viewer is more than a spectator. This is critical as well. You need to think about whether your viewer is just a sort of ghost watching something, or whether you're going to make them involved. And the next stage to that might be some level of interactivity. But you do need to think about who and where and how your viewer fits into the story in a way that you perhaps, again, don't with film, to get the most out of what virtual reality can offer. So think about what they're doing. Any interaction you do, make sure it's meaningful, make sure it's really part of the story, not an added on extra, and make sure it doesn't get in the way of that and distract people from the pure pleasure of being part of that scene. And finally, great sound. Sound is so important to it. It is a visual medium, but the sound is so important for immersing you in that situation, and also can take your imagination on different leaps. So one of the early virtual reality pieces I did, called The Turning Forest, had very simple animation. It didn't show everything that was going on. The sound did the work, and the sound took your imagination to these places and filled in the gaps that weren't shown. And that can be very, very powerful too. So moving on to the next slide, please. I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I've got the evidence to back this up. We ran at the BBC, using the content we'd created, a big trial taking virtual reality to public libraries, because we wanted to try it with real people. The number of people who were buying headsets wasn't enough in homes. And so libraries proved a really great place to see how people responded to the content. And often the people going there had no expectation when they went to their library that they were going to be able to try some virtual reality. And it gave us the chance to try it on people of all ages, rather than just people going to film festivals and who are part of a sort of little bubble world trying to work some of this stuff out. So this was in 2017, and we showed it to thousands of people, and also did various surveys and things to really get some proper evaluation of what worked with the content. So if I play you that, we've made a little film of it again, which really gets across the emotional power of the impact this had on the audiences. So if you could play the next slide in the film, that would be great. It's very short.
It was really cool. I've never tried VR before.
It was just mind-blowing, to be honest.
I'm just blown away by where I'm transported to.
It's just amazing that it's something that a library can host and be part of in such a positive way.
One thing we've really seen in the libraries is that it's not the tech that's drawing people in, it's the content.
I was no longer in Carlisle Library, I was actually transported in the Congo.
Well, all right, so gorillas were coming in my direction.
Not an out-of-body experience, I think.
Yeah, I was crying really when I was immersed in that experience.
They were literally sitting there, manically texting their friends saying, get down here. And you don't often get teenagers texting their friends to come to the library.
Awesome, the future, the way to go.
So I'm really proud of that work. It really proved to us the impact that content could have on people. We had astounding statistics that really people in the BBC were surprised by how powerful the impact. And one of the most interesting things for me was we did a qualitative follow-up study 3 months after people had seen the virtual reality. We were testing how memorable it was, because it was really important for us to understand, is this medium more memorable than, say, watching a documentary about the Congo on television? And people, one of the shots in the films about the Congo was filmed in the station in Kinshasa. And it's very powerful. It's a really interesting shot as if you were traveling with these people walking past, getting off the train, and some of their eyes just catch the camera, so you feel they're looking at you. And people described this shot and remembering being in the station 3 months after watching it, which is really unusual for media. You don't often get that if people have watched a film, that they remember so specifically a particular shot, unless you're working in film and you're engaging with it in that sort of way. So again, it totally confirmed the power of it to us, and was very exciting. And that work continued. But then COVID happened. So of course, this wonderful opportunity to start to explore and engage with the public via libraries to extend the audience of virtual reality was completely killed last year. So very, very sad. The good news is I'm working now on a project to sort of restart this in Coventry, supported by the Arts Council and the Space later this year. There's also lots of work going on in French libraries and some German libraries. I don't know about the Ukraine, but libraries seem a very good place for interesting documentary VR to find a wider audience, which is really exciting. And one of the things about people using VR in a location like that, can you go on to the next slide, please, is that a lot of the friction points we discussed, if you've got somebody there to help you and put the headset on and guide you, a lot of those go away, and people have a really exciting time in the library, and it's much easier than it would be for them to use at home. So I'm going to move on to my final slide where I'm just going to summarize again about some more things about storytelling, because for me, the most important thing when you're thinking about VR stories is to really focus on your audience. And again, it's an obvious thing, but especially when we're grappling with new technology, trying to tell complex stories, dealing with lots of different things, so often we forget the things that we really know. So do start by thinking, who is your audience? Where are they going to be watching this? If they're going to be watching it at home, you need to think about the sort of rituals and things that will help them get in the right mood to watch it. If they're going to watch it at a festival, you're obviously thinking potentially about an installation and things like that that might help guide them towards being in the right state of mind for putting that headset on. We don't yet have the rituals established that we do for watching television or going to the theatre or the cinema for VR. So all these things, we're trying to understand how to get people in the right space and get their mind in the right place to really enjoy a VR experience. But think about it and try and plan it as part of how that experience is going to work for them. Make it easy for them. Make any interaction as simple and intuitive as you can. If you have to do a tutorial first where you have to work out which button it is on this, you know, gamers and other people for long form content might well engage, but you will lose a lot of people if you don't make it really simple. Just point and something then happens, and something that you're very aware that that you have created that impact. So very simple, again, interaction design for that. Think about how you want to make them feel when you're planning your story, and really try and plan those emotional highs and lows so they're in there. And also think about what happens when they take that headset off. What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to do? What happens then? So it's about an experience design that starts from when they first hear about the content to getting in the space to put on the headset, right through to taking it off and what you want them to be saying afterwards. None of this is new. But I think it's stuff we all sometimes forget because we're grappling with so many other new things when we're trying to create successful VR experiences. These are the things that I have to remind myself of every time we start something new. So I hope they help. I hope sharing those with you will help you too when you create your experiences. Go back to the simple things and then extrapolate from that to create more complex and vivid and exciting stories. So on my final slide, I've got a few suggestions of things you can go to find out more. We created this with all the things we learned at the BBC. I'm just going to grab it for you. We created this lovely guide to the stories we did and what works and what doesn't, with some specialist information. It gets more technical as you go further. There's lots of tips about installations and what works for that, and some case studies. There's really useful stuff on user testing and VR as well, which is really important, especially if you're doing interactive VR. There's also some specialist information on prototyping and use of spatial sound. So I'll stick a link for the PDF up on the chat for you in a second. But I hope you all I'm really excited about the future of virtual reality, especially once we get into a position where we can offer location-based experiences again for people. The things I've shown you today are much simpler experiences with simpler headsets. The focus has all been on great storytelling, and we know that that can create magical experiences that people don't forget. With more complex headsets, you can create even more exciting and wonderful adventures for people. But start simple and work your way through them, and you have a whole wonderful world of storytelling to discover. So that's all from me for now, but I'm here to answer some questions.
Yes, we have a good question about dome cinemas. What do you think about it? Yeah.
So domes are brilliant for watching immersive experiences with other people. I love them, and the sound you get in dome cinemas can also be wonderful. You can feel very, very sick the camera movements and things like that. I didn't realize until I went to a cinema that just as with virtual reality headsets, big camera movements and things can make you very nauseous. So again, there are sort of restrictions on shots and things you can use if you want lots of people to be able to enjoy it. Some people can watch it. I can't. I'm a canary, and I'm the first person to say, oh, I can't watch that. It's not quite the same. It's different. It's wonderful. It's big. You can't. It's not quite the same as the headset with headphones in terms of really feeling you're in a space, but it's interesting and it can be very exciting, and you can get sore neck too from looking up. So they're not perfect, but I think domes are great for experiences with lots of people.
We have one question from Piotr, but sorry, I want to ask one more question before. Yes, I want to ask about your research. When I hear about it, I think that you buying headsets for libraries, or what? Or you have your headsets, and what is the mechanism of this?
Okay, so some libraries bought their own, but we bought Oculus Go headsets. So I think it's important to know that we'd run various trials in headset with libraries, and we realized that actually the lower, it is just 360 video that they could take and some light interaction that goes. So what they're not is a 6 degrees of freedom headset where you can walk around and move around. So this all gets a little bit boring. But one of the issues you've got in places like libraries is health and safety issues around people walking around with headsets on. You've got to have a very high staffing ratio if you're going to do those sorts of things to keep people safe. And also the more complex headsets, again, which can offer far more better graphics, better interaction and everything else, they still generally require, even the Oculus Quest, which I've got here, you have to do a setup where you create a boundary around you and stuff. And what we found in libraries was it had to be really easy. The technology was just too if things started breaking or librarians started getting confused and needing support, it wasn't going to work. So we did have to compromise on what technology was going to work there. And I think this really creates a challenge in that sort of experimental emerging tech documentary world, because generally festivals and the community itself favors constant forward-looking experimentation, trying new technology, pushing boundaries. But this is the challenge. If you want to get bigger audiences, sometimes you need to take a step back from that and create content for a device that more people are going to be able to use. So it creates that means there have to be different sort of tiers of content experience that you can go. There's last year in Los Angeles, I went to something called Dreamscape, which was in a shopping mall, and I had it was a virtual reality adventure that you did with 6 other people. And you put on a backpack with a computer, and I had, sensors on my hands and feet, as well as a headset. So everything, I was completely embodied in the experience, and I could see myself, as you can do with virtual reality. But that's a lot of kit, and it's expensive, and so it's balancing all these things out and working out what works in different places. But what I'm convinced of is that even with a less good headset that has a good screen for 360-degree films, whether they're animated or films, if the story is good and it's well-designed content, the impact that can have on audiences can be very, very profound.
Thank you, Piotr.
Zillah, we all want this book. Maybe you can.
Here it is. I can't talk and search at the same time.
Okay.
Okay, it's here, and you can all get it there. I should have got it ready before.
Thank you.
Yeah, hello, Zillah. Thank you very much for your lecture. It was a great pleasure to listen to know how you work. I'm also experimenting with 360 in Ukraine and in some other places. And I'm curious, you mentioned this location-based experience and installations, and I consider it's attract people much more, but as I understand, the BBC mostly distributed through the libraries, where people could watch it in headsets, but also on YouTube. And what is the difference for you? How do you pay attention to these differences? Because if I open YouTube video 360 and watch it in VR, then it's different. And in my experience, viewers on a flat screen, they affected much less with the work than when they watch it immersely in the headset. Do you consider this as a problem? And what's your activities now during lockdown when people only could watch in headsets?
Do you mean, do I think there is value in 360 watched like this on a phone, or?
No, I mean, in the links, it was written that BBC have VR 360 content on YouTube.
Okay, I see what you mean. Right, we put it on YouTube. We don't, it was never designed for YouTube, and this is one of the challenges, because the BBC is a public broadcaster paid for by a license fee. We wanted to make it as accessible to people as we could, and putting it on YouTube as 360 was one way to do that. But you are right, it doesn't work on a flat screen. What we experimented with for damming the Nile was we created a 1 minute cut down version that was designed specifically to work as a 360 social media video. So what was different is, one of the problems with the it's about how you cut it. Everything about it is different. So for example, often you might let a shot last for a headset 360 film, you might let a shot last 30 seconds, 40 seconds. If you did that for a YouTube video, people would get bored. So what we did was we cut a 1 minute version of Damming the Nile, very much faster cuts, boom, 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 boom. It was designed to work as more of a social media video, because the problem is, although once you start putting 360 video on Facebook or YouTube, you have to follow the rules that work on those platforms in terms of what will engage people, and the slow starts that often help people just get in the right zone for a VR experience will not work on those platforms. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
It was to do it. It was just to make it more accessible. But we don't. At least you can watch them and see it. And in theory, you can also watch YouTube via a headset. But if it's live, if it's streamed, the quality may not be very good either. So these are the as my take on this is that 5 years ago, we didn't know whether we could make good VR content and stories. I know we can now. That's a problem. If you give good people a budget, they can make great VR content. The challenge is all around distribution, whether that's at home, in locations. The business models aren't there for that quite yet. There was lots of great experimentation going on prior to COVID for location-based models, but it was still early days. And then COVID has slowed that side down. Meanwhile, there aren't enough headsets in the home. So distributing via the Oculus store, for example, also creates some problems for filmmakers. You're very unlikely to be able to, for people to be able to find your content there. So there's the challenges are all around distribution right now.
Mm-hmm. And if I could, yeah, so I have another question from this. How you see in 5 years? Yeah, do you believe that Facebook would provide a headset for everyone, or what is the future of VR from your point of view?
Well, everyone in the industry is very, very excited about what Apple might do, because they've kept very quiet. And if Apple bring out a headset that enables some VR experiences and that is more comfortable to use, that might really drive things forward. But there's the meanwhile, other augmented reality as well is also being pushed. So it's quite hard to predict exactly what will happen in 5 years, I think, because there's so many different factors going on. There's the as I talked about, there's the technology, there's all the sort of distribution and business model side that will impact on whatever happens and what works and what doesn't. So my best advice at the moment is that already we're seeing that all the technical development in filmmaking that's been led by virtual reality has also had an impact on what's called virtual production for films as well. It is all going somewhere. Exactly where it's going, we're not quite sure. But we just have to go with the flow and keep understanding what works, keep focused on audiences and human behavior and how that relates to this. And even if it doesn't go quite the way we expect at the moment, everything we learn through doing this will always be useful for other things, and especially about how to tell stories with, working out how to tell stories with any new medium like this. You can always then reapply that back to other things too.
Thank you.
We have two questions. First is, maybe does BBC plan to do such research in other countries?
No, I mean, sadly, I'm no longer working for the BBC. After our project, it was decided, because although we'd obviously shown that libraries were a potential place for audiences, and some of that work was continued until COVID hit, the BBC decided to pause on virtual reality until there's a larger number of consumers at home with headsets. So that's why I then closed down my team, and we created the book that I've added so that everyone can look at, so that it may well be something it goes back to. There'll obviously still continue to be experiments and work, but we had this concerted effort where we had a studio to really try and understand it. But until the number of consumers at home with headsets increases, we decided it was best to pause, that lots of other things needed to happen too, and lots of other great work is going on in the UK and every other country to keep that understanding going.
We wanted this research in Ukraine after quarantine. Yeah,
but you need enough good content. That's the thing. We had to wait till we had a body of really good content before you could do the research, because if you do it too early, you won't get the response that you want. I think the biggest surprise to me, and the loveliest surprise for documentary makers, is that of all the content we tested in the libraries, probably the films about the Congo had the strongest reaction, and that wasn't what I necessarily expected. I thought that the entertainment, the easier to watch things would be the most popular. And perhaps that's because people who go to libraries are curious and they want to find out about things. But it was certainly a very, very different audience than you would get, for example, in an arts centre or a museum in a library. It was demographically, it was different. But I think that's great news for all documentary makers, that a well-made story about that will take people to somewhere they haven't been before, or understand about people very different to them, could have that impact in VR. So I think that's really, really good news.
And what's you working on now?
What am I working on now? Well, I've been there was a project, a big project that was that I've just finished helping on, which was a Royal Shakespeare Company did a big production called Dream, which was again looking at how virtual reality technology and augmented reality technology could impact on live performance. I'm also really interested in exploring how virtual reality could be used for well-being and mental health. So that's another area that I'm looking at. Again, I suppose I'm focused on how we can use the technology for good and make sure that that as it develops, it's used to make people happier and has beneficial uses. Somebody's asked about education. Yeah, so education and virtual reality, yes. Of course, the Berlin Blitz video you see just makes you think, oh yes, wouldn't that be great in schools? Again, the practical issues around headsets in classrooms and teachers with 30 children can make that difficult. One of the great things about the work we did in libraries was that in many areas, schools went to visit libraries and then were able to use VR. So there could be a connection there in many countries, again, if libraries become a starting point for wider virtual reality distribution. So yes, VR can be used, there's no question that VR could be used as part of education. As I said, I don't think it's good for some things. So lots of, the sort of more factual things that are part of education, it may not be, but for getting people excited. And of course, for any subject where you need to visualize things. So it's no coincidence that we ended up doing 2 series about rivers. There is something about geography that works really well in virtual reality. So again, if you're imagining, for example, this could be in 360 video to show different land formations and things, but you can also do very good CGI demos to show, for example, how a glacier or river shapes a valley. You see that in VR and you suddenly understand it. Whereas when I was at school and we had little diagrams in books, it was quite hard sometimes to think, right, how does that work? Whereas a full 3D simulation showing that process, you can understand something in 30 seconds that might take you several weeks to get your head around if you were only seeing diagrams in a book. So I think it's really strong for that. And then obviously subjects like chemistry and things where you need to visualize in a 3D space how molecules work together. Lots of great uses for education, but again, a challenge, no issue about what sort of content might work in my mind, but an issue about the practicalities of and distribution and how that works. Oh, another one here. The theatre, the Dream. You would like to know about the Royal Shakespeare Company one. Look up Royal Shakespeare Company and Dream on Google, and you should find plenty about it. I can put something in for you. But that project, the performances ended last week. and there will be a huge amount of work done over the next 6 months to share all the information about what worked and what didn't from that. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to hear talks and understand more about that project over the next few months. So it was a consortium of different groups. There was a virtual reality, a company that's done a lot of virtual reality called Marshmallow Laser Feast involved as well. And they do very experiential VR pieces. They did a virtual reality experience at the Saatchi Gallery in London called Oceans of Air. And so you put on a headset with a backpack. It also used smells as well. And you were taken through this sort of experience where you were with trees and roots, and it was a very sort of, you could see your breath as you breathed as well. So less of a sort of narrative story, more an experiential thing with roots and trees and being part of that system and seeing how air circulated. I can't really describe it. It's you have to put the headset on and be there to sort of feel what it's like, but a very sensory virtual reality experience. And they're called, they do some quite cool stuff. So they're Marshmallow Laser Feast. I'll tap that in if you want to look them up. Any more questions?
How many people can read this performance?
The Royal Shakespeare Company one? Well, it was, okay, so here was originally it was planned as an experience in immersive experience in a shopping centre in Stratford upon Avon, where Shakespeare was born. So you were going to have a headset on and walk through the forest and encounter people. But it was planned for Midsummer Night last June. And of course, because of COVID, it couldn't happen. So they reimagined it as an online experience. And I hope I was fundamental in persuading them that there were not enough people with these at home to make it worthwhile. And because it was funded by the British government as part of academic research funding, and they were asked to try and create an experience that could have an audience of over 100,000 people. And so in the end, what they decided to do, it was created entirely using immersive technology and live motion capture and virtual environments created in the game engine Unreal. But it was viewable on a computer screen or phone. There was a layer of interactivity where you could be a firefly in the forest. And so for people who bought tickets, they could interact and be a firefly. And for those that didn't, it was streamed on YouTube. And you may well still be able to see one of those streamed performances on YouTube. It's very, very beautiful. What I would say is you have to, there is so much going on behind the scenes that perhaps as an audience member, you're not aware of in just terms of what a technical feat it is. Because it was all done live, and the actors were responding to the fireflies who were being led by the audience. But you don't always feel that when you're watching it. And so things like the music is using a technology called gesturement. So when the actors move, the music is in response to their movements. I mean, when you watch it, you'll think, oh my goodness, that's very precise, but you wouldn't necessarily realize the amount of tech behind that to make that work. Cultural virtual reality projects in the UK. Well, there is a fund called Creative XR, which is run by the Arts Council and the Digital Catapult, which supports a number of projects each year at a sort of early stage of project. but again, it is still early days. So there aren't there are sources of money, but there isn't anything specifically I can point you to. Things like the Royal Shakespeare Company Dream Project was part of a big funding process to fund 4 very big projects. So those are, once those, there is no sort of permanent fund available every year at the moment. It is responding to specific opportunities when they come up. But virtual reality is certainly when there are big festivals. So Coventry, a city in the Midlands in the UK, is going to be our City of Culture next year, and there's certainly specific funding associated with that, and lots of those sorts of projects then want a virtual reality project as part of that. So those are the sort of ways in which virtual reality is starting to get funded as well, rather than through a specific fund for VR. How do you make subtitles? Oh, this is interesting. So we have subtitled content. So, for example, when we've taken content to France, we've put subtitles on. It can be quite distracting, and this is a real problem for accessibility and things. That the problem is, the beauty of VR, of course, is that you're immersed in this space, and what I find, as soon as I start having to read a lot of things, that sort of then is employing a different bit of my brain that's sort of concentrating on reading. So the power of the immersion can be reduced by that, because you're just focusing on reading the words. So it is hard. I mean, what we made a specific decision for any translation that we required for the films like in the Congo and the Nile, to use a voiceover rather than to use subtitles for that. So you hear the start of the person speaking, but then somebody is saying that in English over them. So again, what I would say about subtitles is they need to be quite short and easily readable. But if you're subtitling for accessibility, then generally they do want it to be verbatim, every single word, and that will be potentially difficult, I think, for people to have the time to read. So we haven't really designed that needs a lot of more design thought. And again, there are people at the BBC and the EBU as well who are starting research to try and understand how best to do that.
Okay, I think we need to finish. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. I hope that was interesting. And anyone who do get in touch via LinkedIn, or I'm better on LinkedIn, if you want to find out anything more. Just before I go, if there are any more requests for me to send anything, do just search those BBC blogs there. There's a very good one on the research in libraries, if you want to read more about that too. But everything is summarised in the guide, the magic guide. I put the link up to, so hopefully that will answer a lot of your questions and just get you thinking. We haven't got all the answers yet, but if you think about your audience first and think, does this story really require VR? How am I going to get interesting experiences into the story that will really give people a thrill with a headset? You'll make great VR. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.